G'day, welcome back to the channel. It's 2022. I want to do a state of the hobby address. Let's talk about the hobby, what's happening to it and where is it going in 2022, because in recent years we have seen some dramatic changes to the hobby as we have known it, and not all of them are for good. And I'm talking about rules and regulations, of course, because things are getting tougher and tougher. There are age limits being put on the hobby. For example, if you're in the USA, you have to be 13 years old to register. You can't register if you're under 13. So if you're a 12-year-old kid that saved your pocket money to buy a 251-gram model airplane, and mum and dad, or maybe you don't have a dad, maybe you just got a mum, and mum's not interested, or she doesn't have a credit card, and there's no other adult there to help you, I'm sorry, you're out of bounds. You can't fly your plane. The hobby is out of bounds, and that's unreasonable. That's unreasonable. In Australia, 16 years old. If you're under 16, you really got to have an adult involved as well, which is crazy, because when I was a kid, I got involved in this hobby when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I did most things on my own. My parents weren't interested in helping me. They were all too busy. They were busy doing other things. So if I'd been reliant on them, I would never have enjoyed the hobby. I've never gotten into the hobby. And you might think, well, 13, 16, who cares? Well, I think we know that once you hit puberty, model aircraft tend to get put on the back burner. Girls or boys, whichever your preference is, they become far more important. So unless you capture children when they're young, when they're in that 7, 8, 9-year-old age group, and get the passion for model aviation in them then, they may never get it. They may choose something else. And that's going to be a huge loss to the model community and to the aviation community, the manned aviation community, because manned aviation gets its new talent, many of them from the hobby pool. The group of keen and avid modelers who have got involved at a young age, and then after they've settled down a bit, got back into the hobby and built model aircraft. Those people are learning because they enjoy it. It's not like going to school or university just to learn a subject so that you can get a degree and get a job. When you learn something because it's your passion, you learn far more quickly, far more easily, and far more effectively, I think. So by locking children out of the hobby, we are doing everybody a disservice. And of course, we're told, oh, this has to be done. This has to be done. And the regulators have popped up two main reasons why we need all this extra regulation. We need registration, we need remote ID. The two things are safety and security. So in this video, I'm going to examine both of those claims and see how much truth there is in what's being offered to us in terms of explanations. Let's look at safety first. We're told that drones and model aircraft pose a danger to people, a threat to people, human lives, aircraft, manned aviation. But that doesn't tally with the data. And let's look at recreational multi-rotor drone use, for example. Well, these have been a thing for over 10 years. And there has not been one death attributed to the recreational use of multi-rotor drones. So how are we going to reduce that figure? Do we need to reduce that figure? Now, we all know that we can't eliminate risk. We can only manage risk. And that's what the job of a good regulator has to do. That's their job. That's their role, to manage risk to an acceptable limit. And if we can accept in the USA 30,000 deaths a year on the road as an acceptable level, and hundreds of people dying in recreational aviation incidents every year as an acceptable level, then why isn't 0 an acceptable level for drone use? It makes no sense to me. And obviously, vehicle deaths and manned aviation deaths are acceptable, or there'd be a lot more effort going into regulating and controlling and restricting those activities to reduce the death toll. But there's not. So they are acknowledging, by not doing anything, governments are saying, yeah, these are acceptable levels. We're not happy about it, but we'll live with them because that level of risk is acceptable. Yet we have no deaths as a result of the recreational use of multi-rotor drones, and that's not acceptable because they keep winding up the screws, tightening the screws, reducing our freedoms, removing our freedoms, and restricting what we can do. So the safety thing doesn't really ring true. The evidence, the undeniable evidence is that this is the safest branch of aviation there has ever been, and it will always be the safest branch of aviation. If you don't hoist someone's little backside up into the air, you're a lot safer. And even when it comes to endangering manned aviation, we were told for ages that if a drone hits a helicopter, the helicopter will crash and people will die. And there's been only a few evidenced instances where helicopters have hit drones. And two cases it was police drones, but recreational drones hitting manned aircraft have produced no injuries, no deaths, no major property damage. We've been lied to about the severity of the risk involved. The risk is very small, and the time has proven this to be the case. So when the regulators come to us and say, you must have remote ID because safety, or you must register because safety, and we must restrict the age limit to 13 or 16 because safety, I don't believe them. And I don't think you should either. For example, how many 13-year-old or how many sub 13-year-old children have been involved in any of the things that they say drones are doing that are bad, like delivering drugs to prison, which may have happened on occasion, or flying near airports and endangering air traffic? I don't see a bunch of under 13-year-olds doing that. So why are they banned from the hobby? Unless they've got an adult who's willing to use their credit card and to basically register on their behalf. Why? It makes no sense. It is just bullshit. Now that second reason is security. Apparently drones are a big threat to security, and one of the reasons being that a bad actor could fly a drone in an area where they're not supposed to and get access to some sensitive information by their cameras looking down at maybe a military base or a power plant or some other important piece of infrastructure. And I don't believe this either. I don't believe it for a number of reasons. First of all, every bad state that might pose a threat to the USA or the UK or Australia has spy satellites. They already have spy satellites. Have you seen the quality of images you can get from a spy satellite? Well, here are a few here. Look at this. This is taken from a spy satellite. That's as good, if not better, than you would get from a drone flying in the same area. So why would bad actors or bad states, why would they go to all the risks of actually flying a drone when they can get all the pictures they want without the country even knowing about it from the safety of space? It doesn't make any sense to me. And even then, you might think, well, what about the small states like North Korea? It may not have suitably capable spy satellites. Well, guess what? Cameras. Now, I use a cheap $1,600 consumer camcorder, and this is what my camcorder will do if I want it to. Look how far I can zoom in. This is only 24 times zoom, but look how far I can zoom in on this aircraft. That is amazing, and mine is at the bottom end. For less money, you can get cameras that will zoom in 75 times. That's 3 times as many times as my camcorder. Or you can go to, again, another cheapish camera, which will give you 125 times zoom. So you can be standing miles away from a sensitive piece of infrastructure, and you can film it. And you risk nothing because it's not like it's a drone that can be detected. No, you're too far away to be detected. Nobody knows you're filming it. So this claim that, oh, these drones are going to spy on sensitive infrastructure, bullshit, absolute bullshit. Why, if that is the case, are not cameras with a zoom of more than, say, 5 times, why do they not require registration? Why do they not require remote ID so that the security forces know when they're entering, or even within 5 miles of a important piece of infrastructure? If it is about security, you'd think that would be the thing that they would do, but they don't. I don't know why that is. Also thinking of security, remember a drone was found in the grounds of the White House some time ago, and there was all sorts of kerfuffle about that, and all things had to change, and this is one of the justifications given for having to have registration on drones, so we can track these people down, and tougher rules and regulations. Well, in 2015, a gentleman by the name of Doug Hughes landed his ultralight autogyro on the lawn of the White House. He wanted to deliver a couple of bags of mail to the politicians. So he landed his autogyro on the lawn of the White House. So why is it then that after a tiny drone is found having blown away and landed in the White House, we get all this registration, tests, remote ID imposed upon our community, yet the ultralight community can still fly without registration, without having to sit any exams, without remote ID or even a radio. We've got two exactly the same situations, but in our case, we have to endure massive amounts of over-regulation. The ultralight community, no, they're still out there doing whatever they want, virtually unregulated. So this doesn't make sense either. There's no consistency in this. And again, I claim, therefore, that we're talking bullshit. There is no security implication from our drones. And even so, how has a small foam model, might be flown by a 12-year-old kid in a park, how is that a threat to security? How is that? I flew models in school grounds when I was a kid. I didn't pose a threat to security. We don't see 12-year-old North Korean agents flying foam models of Piper Cubs to get pictures of a nuclear power plant, do we? This whole thing is a fabrication on the part of governments directing regulators to make these crazy, crazy rules. You've got to wonder why. Well, I think we know why this is. Now, it's often not the regulators that make these rules. It is governments. It's politicians that make these rules. For example, in the USA, the FAA didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, let's introduce remote ID. What a good idea that'd be. No, they were directed to do this by Congress. They were directed by the politicians to do this. They said, you must implement remote ID. And for example, here in New Zealand, the local regulator mulled over the concept of registration for drones, and they decided no, there was no value to it. It was going to be too expensive, and there's no real benefit to it. They're smart people at CAA. Some of them were quite smart. They said, no, not worth it. So what happened? The New Zealand government said, we want registration. We're going to give this to another agency to make the rules. CAA, you'll just be enforcing them, but you're not going to make the rules. We're going to give it to a different agency that we have more control over, because it's the politicians driving these rules, this regulatory overreach. And why would they do that? Why would politicians even care that a 13-year-old kid flies a foam model in a park? Well, the reality is that the politicians, and this is my honest opinion, I believe the politicians are getting a lot of backhanders from the drone industry, an industry that is flush with venture capital. So many companies have gone out and said, we're going to deliver drones, we're going to deliver pizzas and coffee and defibrillators and medical supplies by drone, but we need this airspace clear so we can do that. And they've said to the politicians, make it happen. And by the way, would you like to have a holiday in Hawaii on us? This is the way things go. This is real world. This does happen. It's been proven to happen before. And I honestly believe it's still happening now in respect to drones. So when you've got politicians who are really looking out for themselves rather than anyone else, they take the money and then they make the rules to suit the people who pay them. And this is what's going on. So it's dishonest and it's corrupt. And as a community, we are suffering because largely we've just stood around and said, okay, we're not cohesive. We're not unified. We don't really care. We're too laid back. We're a bunch of sissies. We're a giant bunch of sissies. And this year it's going to change. This is why I'm making this video, because I'm laying out the path to what I plan to do this year. I plan to get some of these rules thrown out because in the court of public opinion, they don't hold any water. Like, as I've just explained now, that the rationale for these overreaching rules have no basis in fact. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove it over and over again. We're going to embarrass the politicians and make them explain. No good chasing the regulators down. They're only doing what they're told by politicians. It's time to take the battle to the politicians, the people who have actually made the decision based on fattening their own wallet, I honestly believe. So we will embarrass them in the court of public opinion. We also need to educate the public, let them know that they have also been deceived by politicians and media and others that these drones are so dangerous, so dangerous. Yeah, and they don't understand. They don't understand. So I have some plans afoot, and I will be telling you what those are in upcoming weeks. But I wanted to let you know that, as you can see, this is an unacceptable state of affairs. We're barring children from the hobby. We are unreasonably vilifying the hobby when it is one of the safest activities on the planet. And we are unreasonably making claims that the hobby is a threat to national security when it's no more of a threat to national security than camera phones, camcorders, DSLR cameras, spy satellites. All those things are doing a much better job at what they claim our drones will do. And if it's down to delivering drugs to prisons, well, prison guards are a much better vector for delivering drugs than drones. And the evidence again has proven that drugs in prisons and other contraband are many, many times more likely to be delivered by a member of the prison staff than by a drone. There you go. Anyway, so go to the comments now. Am I on the right track? Are you going to support me in doing this? Because I will need some support. I can't do it all on my own. I will be taking the initiative, but I'd like some backup from people. So go down there to the comments and tell me what you think. And if you've got ideas about the best way to do this, then tell me too. But on my watch, we're not barring children from this hobby. I'm not having it. I just am not having it. This hobby has given me a great deal over the decades, and I'd like it to give a great deal to other future generations to come. But the way we're headed, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. You are pivotal in this. I could not do any of this without your support. And so you guys saving the hobby, I hope. Anyway, that's it. Videos to edit. Get on with the fun stuff. That's what you're here for. Don't want to watch this boring talking head. Never mind. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!